Ready? Welcome to Gadsden High School for our, still no? Yes. We're good? Oh, very good. Very good. Well, welcome, sorry about that. Welcome to Gadsden High School for our secondary virtual summit. I'm excited to be your presenter today. My name is Jed Duggan, and I am the new assistant principal here at Gadsden High School. It's wonderful to be meeting everybody like this in this interesting time frame, so where we get to all explore online learning together. Before I start any sessions, one of the things that I wanted to do was thank our wonderful support staff that we have here, which is the whole GHS administrative team. Mr. Hiron, who is also on the chat, Mr. Martinez, who is another member of the chat, and then Danielle Rodriguez, who is our technology partner and support today. So the first thing I want to get started with is getting started in the online and blended learning environment. So before I get started with any content, I just wanted to draw everybody's attention to the Google Classroom that we have created for today's sessions. And so you can join if you haven't already. I did check in there this morning and I saw a large amount of teachers had already joined. But I just want to encourage everybody to join the blended classroom. You can join through your GISD account using the code UY3WRRD. It's imperative that we have everybody in that classroom. At the end of the morning session, there will be an asynchronous session led by our new district technology specialist, Leslie Johnson, and we will be taking attendance for that. So we want to make sure that everybody gets the attendance for attending these sessions and the proper credit. So I'm going to move forward to our course measurables. So this is for the getting started section of our measurables. As you can see, our task is to create a virtual classroom this fall. And we want to welcome all of our GISD students into that virtual classroom. It's imperative in a virtual learning environment to build that familiarity with the students and with the families. They are not able to see you face to face every day, but there still needs to be some level of connectivity there. So in a virtual classroom, we want to make sure that all of the students learn norms and routines and expectations similar to the brick and mortar environment. We want to make sure that there is an increased virtual engagement, that students know that they can log in every day and interact every day with a teacher and with other students. And then finally, and I can't stress this enough, it's imperative to remain positive. And I would use this from experience even this morning, and just a few of the things of us going out and setting ourselves out here to do this training is there will be technology glitches, there will be issues that you come across, and I just want to encourage everybody to not let that get you down, and just to remain positive. Stress to the students, stress to the families. We're exploring we're transforming education with this model that we're doing. And so we're going to eventually come to a point where we have the classroom, but we have a classroom of learning that extends beyond the four walls of our traditional classrooms. Keep in mind that well-organized online curriculum is the foundation of a flipped or blended classroom. It has to be well-organized. The primary benefit of technology is to reorganize the instructional process, maximize face-to-face interactions. You're going to hear the words lower order thinking skills and higher order thinking skills a lot today. And I want to make sure that we stress that those face-to-face interactions stay on the topics of higher order thinking skills and stressing higher order thinking skills. Okay, I want to stress this also, because this will be a theme for the day. Technology will not replace the teacher. Okay, it never will be able to do that. A teacher is important to the learning of the students in any learning environment. At some point, we will move beyond this health crisis. And then we can use the financial investment that the district has committed to move forward in the best form of serving our students. That would be combining both what we do well in the face-to-face environment with what we're going to do well in the online or virtual learning environment. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn to the course deliverables for this session. So in this session, I'm hoping that teachers will get a start on the first unit of activities for week 1. And they're really going to introduce, you know, there's a lot of nervousness in what we're facing going forward. And it's prevalent among teachers and it's prevalent among students. How is this going to happen? And so the key is really that week 1, introducing students to norms, letting them know what to expect in their classroom, going over your expectations, going over your course design, getting the students to gain some familiarity with the course and the overall progression of their course. So you're going to hear the term course navigation, and that's something that's extremely important for students as they're going to see the outline and they're going to want to know, how do I get from this class to this class to this class, or this lesson to this lesson to this lesson. And so the course navigation has to be logical, sequential, and make a lot of sense to the students. Finally, we want students to know what their requirements are in participation. And we get this question, we've already probably faced this question quite a bit, which is, what am I supposed to do in this classroom? How do I log in? How do I get credit? Okay, and so we want to be able to stress to students what their expectations are, what are the requirements as far as completing lessons, assigning, you know, of turning in lessons, of participating in discussions, of participating in Google Meet sessions or Zoom sessions, as some teachers might have tried already. Students in this getting started section would hopefully also see a pacing guide. They should have time frames for modules and units, and they will be introduced to what I like to refer to as the learning cycle. Okay, and this is just the overall methodology and construction of your lessons. All right, the learning cycle and developing that learning cycle, that familiar learning cycle that is routine, is crucial to the navigation of the course. And that's really where the students are going to survive, is when they understand what your learning cycle is. All right? So let's take a minute here to chat in the virtual chat. And I just have a question for you. What is the purpose of a syllabus? And I'm going to turn on my device here and take a look at some of the chat as well. Does anybody see any chat?
They can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Alrighty. Yeah. Okay. So we're ready to, you want to move forward? Okay, so moving forward, let's look in and let's dig into the syllabus just a little bit. So syllabus should be the roadmap of your course. It should include a few things that are essential to the course. These are teacher contact information, class meeting times, very important because I know all of us want to make sure that we take attendance, record attendance, and are clear about the expectations for attendance. So class meeting times is extremely important in the remote model. We want to make sure that we clarify what are the technology requirements. So most of our district, thankfully, has been under the umbrella, covered under the umbrella of the district. And so we've seen the Chromebook distribution, and most of their technology requirements, we see hotspots starting to be distributed. So most of the technology requirements we're taking care of as a district. But you just want to make sure, there's always a little bit of troubleshooting that you have to do as a teacher in a virtual or a remote learning environment. So this is talking about maybe having an idea of what web browsers to use. Most of us use Google Chrome. I think Google Chrome is most compatible with almost all designs and almost all resources, but it is important to know a little bit about that. Some students still use Firefox or Internet Explorer, and so you might want to check and know a little bit about what are the differences between those and what are the limits between those. And I would say one of the things that I've found in my experience of being in the virtual world is that Chrome is usually the best way to go. It's the most accessible of everything, and so I would try to really encourage a lot of students to use Chrome. One of the things that we'll use as our technology partner is fluent in Mac and Apple, is they will use, sometimes you'll get some students using Safari. All right, and so that's also a little bit of troubleshooting that you'll have to do with those. All right, and then finally, the last part of the syllabus that we want to make sure that you have is a biography. Because we want to add some personalization to your class. Tell your students a little bit about who you are, what you're doing. Pictures are great, it provides a little bit of personality to your syllabus page, so they know what your interests are and they can connect with you. These are all things that we would generally do in the traditional classroom, and so we just have to find a different way to do it in the online classroom. Please remember that the biggest challenge and misconception in remote learning is that our virtual classrooms will lack interaction. Okay, this should not be the case. This cannot be the case. A large majority of today's students are familiar with social media. Okay, especially our middle school and our high school students. They absolutely know and how to interact, and they interact regularly on social media. So the online presence and your online persona will likely be welcomed by a lot of students because they are somewhat familiar with this themselves, and it will provide to them, it will provide a little bit more human side to you. Okay, students should also in a syllabus get an overview of the lessons, so they should have some pacing guide. Some grading expectations. It's important to know when work needs to be submitted and when work will be completed. We want to set grading expectations that generally go around, most assignments will be graded within 24 to 48 hours. And as a teacher, I would always recommend to set aside some time in the day, either before you go home or right when you get to school, to sit down and try to look at your grade book and clear it out if you can. Just give it some time to look through. This adds a little bit of immediate feedback to the students. One of the things that we will talk about later on is the fear is the students would be isolated, and that isolation starts to take place when students aren't getting regular feedback, or if they're not having webmails answered and things like that. And then I would say from a teacher perspective, if you're usually not proactive with your communication, that's when you start getting a lot of parent calls, and things tend to become very urgent in the online world. So it's best to always be proactive. Set some times out, 24 to 48 hours for assignments. They'll be turned around. If they're big projects, long projects, things that take a little bit more time to grade, try to turn them around within a week. And that's usually a great practice to do for online learning. It will establish some flexibility for reteaching and relearning also whenever students miss a skill or something and you have to go back and review. All right, so let's discuss a little bit of the benefits of the syllabus. Quality syllabus is a vital tool in the introduction of online learning. It can be a guide throughout the semester, as many of us know and we learned, when we were in college. I know that I regularly had the syllabus with me and would go over to understand what I was going through that day in class. Students should be referred to the syllabus a lot. I know that as an administrator and also when I was a teacher, I would get the same question a lot of times from different people all throughout the semester, and I wanted to make sure, and I notice that a lot of times that information was provided up front, and we can just be redirected back to the syllabus. And once students learn that that information is in the syllabus and they start to use it and refer to it, they will feel a little bit more comfortable in progressing through your course. Okay. A syllabus minimizes the repetitive questions. It builds some scaffolding for the course navigation and what the participation expectations are. And finally, and it's a contract between you. It's a contract between you and the parents. Okay, so that's the other part of remote learning, is that parent involvement becomes very high because they're a lot of times at home and supporting students from with their lessons. And so that contract, that syllabus, is really a guide for them as well. All right. So I wanted to direct everybody back to the Google Classroom. In there, you'll see an example. There's a New Mexico history class that was designed for an online setting by Miss Tracy Allen. She is an SDHS social studies teacher, and I wanted to thank her for volunteering this syllabus. But I encourage everybody to go through there. It's very nice. It has all of the key points into that need to be in the syllabus. There's a little bit of personalization to it, and there are grading expectations, pacing guides. So all of the basic components of a syllabus. So if you need an example, then I would encourage you to do that. There, within that Google Classroom, there is also a template to help you in the construction of your own syllabus. However, I would also tell you that this is a great time to be creative. Okay, so I've seen websites built, the interactive pieces, things like that. As long as the information is in there and that part is standardized, then the rest of it, you know, I encourage creativity and innovation. That's the benefit that we're getting from this. All right. So I am going to move forward into our pacing guides. Our pacing guides in the online, it's a common understanding in education that students have a lot of different learning styles and they learn at different paces. So this is one of the benefits of online learning, is that especially in the asynchronous side of things, students can navigate at a little bit of their different paces, and so you'll get some students going ahead and some students going behind. All right, so that flexibility is built into the online environment, but it's important to control it, is what I would say, because you know your classroom could change pretty quickly if you have all of the students at different places. And so it's important to put together a pacing guide just to establish some timelines for your units. This will help guide your synchronous sessions, what we're going to do in Google Meet every day, every week. Okay, so those are important parts of this. It will establish grading periods. That's the other thing, is that you would see a lot of times, you know, one student is a little bit ahead or a little bit behind, and so the grading periods kind of marks off what units are part of that grading period. So if they don't complete it in exactly the same time frame, a synchronous time frame, then you can take snapshots and say, you should be at this point by October, and this is what you're going to be responsible for in a 9-week time period. All right. The other thing is it really helps students who are transferring in and out of the district, coming back and forth, because I think the tendency in the online learning and among most teachers is that because we didn't observe it and assess it ourselves, it's difficult to really give an assessment of what the students' skills are. And so we've taught a class for 2 months and then a new student comes in, the tendency could be to put that student back at the beginning because you're not sure whether they got all the skills that led up to this point. And that penalizes the student for something that's really out of their control. Okay, so it makes sense to just have some guidelines, some pacing, and say if you come in during this moment, then we are going to set you at this point of the class, and then all of the lessons before, we're going to assume that you got them at your old school. Okay. Finally, a pacing guide is the first step in identifying what can be completed online and what can be completed in the face-to-face classroom. Because sooner or later, we're going to be back in the traditional environment. And like I said, we want to use this time to really bridge and transform our education to where we're still using parts of the online curriculum, but then we're also maximizing those face-to-face experiences. All right, so I'm going to move over to the learning cycle. You heard me refer to this before. This is the final part of our session this morning. So the learning cycle, it focuses on what the students are going through, how they're navigating their lessons and what they're learning. Okay, this is a part of the design which requires the most thought, definitely. Okay, and it also requires a lot of sequencing and detail in the planning parts of this. Okay, there are scaffolding pieces that you do, building lessons on top of each other, foundational to higher order. And there are also, where am I going to put my videos in? Where am I going to make sure the directions are there for each of the assignments? And so this is really the important aspects of what you have in the learning cycle. Okay, students should navigate through in a sequential manner, and again, pay attention to when you're introducing a unit, you want to bring those students from lower order thinking skills to higher order thinking skills. Okay, so we always say the student navigates the courses and the teacher helps facilitate from lots to hots. Okay. An ideal learning cycle aligns student assessment to mastery of content. In addition, it can provide a framework for more engaging synchronous or in-class experiences. Again, like I said, if we really plan out these, we can start to identify this can be done online, and then I'm going to maximize my face-to-face time. One of the key components of building a quality flip model is to establish good design and make sure that the students know where they're going, which allows them for some student empowerment and some advocacy so that when they go home or when they're outside of your classroom, they are doing what you're expecting them to do. They're gaining those foundational skills, and then you're coming in the classroom and you're spending most of your time expanding their minds and really expanding their learning cycles. Okay. We want to shift away. One of the things that I would say with technology, and this has been around in education for a while, is there was kind of education, this was the way I kind of was taught when I grew up, it was the banking theory. It was kind of the idea that I opened my bank account and the teachers poured in whatever the knowledge was. Okay, and so we want to move away from that, because we're living in a world right now where information is really a commodity for almost all students. And so what we really need to do is transition our role away from that banking model of education into the idea that we are giving them the skills to be able to find the information and then ultimately make sense of that information, make meaning of it, so that they can use it in a productive manner. So this is connected to a learning theory called connectivism. So I just real quick wanted to look in the chat and see if anyone is familiar with connectivism. So while you're chatting there, and please describe if you know anything about connectivism, or if you've heard of it before, if you've taken any classes with Dr. Julia Parra at NMSU. I would note that she was the one who introduced me to connectivism. And so this theory has been around since, I think, 2005 was when it started. And George Simons and Stephen Downes introduced this theory. And it kind of builds from the perspective of students have a superhighway of information. And then we need to be able to, and they can access all of the information that's really in the world through this superhighway. And we as the teachers have this role of facilitating it, because as we're starting to observe, there's so much information that it can become paralyzing, and we don't know what's valid and what's not valid. This is our role of teachers. We have to, because students can become paralyzed by getting both sides of the story. Right? And this is different, opposite from the way I was taught when I grew up. I grew up in more of a narrative type of format. And now we're in a position where it's really what is true, what is valid. And this is kind of what we're helping the students to do. Okay? So one of the things that I would stress with the connectivist model is that we need to move away from what I call binary thinking, which is this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, and understanding there are multiple perspectives. This is the way students think too, as they see a lot of these things out on the internet, and they see it's no longer right or wrong. It's really what's important, what we can prioritize. All right, so I am going to shift forward in the learning cycle design, kind of take it from the theoretical to the practical. So how do we take that and move that into the remote learning side of things? One of the most important things that we can do is set up our instructional processes in a logical and sequenced manner that is user-friendly, guides the students through the lessons. Okay? We encourage creativity. Among students, or among teachers, no two teachers are the same, no two subjects are the same, and they're not taught the same. So your personality is what makes you great as a teacher, along with your methodology. All right? But I would say that it's important to make sure that you scaffold your lessons. And so one of the things that you'll plan for in the online environment is a very basic building from foundational or lower order thinking skills to higher order thinking skills. And so building your lessons that way, chunking them in 1 to 2 week time frames, that way it really helps the students navigate through each 2 week time period, and then you can get an assessment from it. All right. You'll see the students usually progress from the introduction phase to the instruction phase to learning, completing learning activities, and then ultimately doing that major assessment, which hopefully they will perform very well at. Okay, keep in mind we always want to maximize the synchronous or face-to-face time, so those interactions are really what is crucial to a learning environment. Again, we're going to keep an idea that eventually we will come back, so we want to keep that in place, that the time that they're here at the school is going to be maximized. All right. So let's transition, or let's look at the next example, and this kind of captures what I was going over with everyone, which is the time frame is 1 to 2 weeks. You introduce your students to the objectives, the weeks of activities, then you have some vocabulary, and you have the essential learning and background, and then eventually you're going to go into more of the formal operations process for students, which can occur face-to-face or in a Google Meet in this early period of the year. And then and those are really rich learning experiences, and then they take those rich learning experiences and hopefully continue them on their own with a little bit of student advocacy and student engagement. All right. So I did provide a model. I know that the governor has us shut down for a month from as far as coming to school, but I did provide what a typical week would look like, or a planning guide for a week, where we have our group A and what they do Monday, Tuesday, and then they would shift over. Group B would come in Thursday and Friday, and you would see kind of a mirror type of planning for those two. And really what you're mirroring is the synchronous sessions, okay? And then finally, that brings us close to the end of this first session. So let's look at a virtual chat. Let's take just a couple minutes to discuss some of the things that you hope to implement that you took from this Getting Started training. Right? What are some ideas that you have for your syllabus? And let's share them amongst everybody in the chat. What about preparing for the eventual hybrid model? What are some things that you're going to do that you're looking forward to doing in your classroom with the students, even if they're limited, that they come in? And then what are some shifts, some things that you hope to take from this remote experience? And if there's any great questions or anything like that, then feel free to throw them my way. And I promise to be a little bit shorter with the accessibility piece that's coming up next. It's not quite as lengthy as this Getting Started part. This is great. This is great. I see some things, an interactive syllabus, always very engaging for students. A flip model, it's really terrific. Alrighty, so we're going to wrap up this session. And for this session, by the end of hopefully by the end of the day, we do know that we're under a little bit of time, but soon within the Google Classroom, we want you to complete the following things, which is the Getting Started unit. It could be very small, and hopefully you've seen the Google Classroom. So you see there's not a lot to my Getting Started unit that I put in there. So it's just kind of introducing students to the classroom. You want to have one activity for getting started, whether it be a scavenger hunt, a syllabus activity, something like that, syllabus quiz, even some type of, like I said, I've seen teachers go through and have biography, where they go through their biographies, the students go through and pick out points that they identify with and things like that. All right, and so for this session, one of the things that we want to see is, a syllabus or a getting started activity. If you feel comfortable, creating a video is always wonderful. It can be a little challenging to be on camera, but it's always fun and highly engaging for the students. So I want to thank you for your time in this morning session, and I'm going to transition over to the accessibility and usability. Alrighty. All right. So we're back, and I just want to thank everybody. Was reading some of the comments in the chat here, and so very, very nice. And one of the things I wanted to mention going in is, there's definitely a level of insecurity as far as what we're facing with the online environment. And so yes, the teachers can be a little bit, or the students can be a little bit confused. And again, there's going to be, like I said, a little sense of urgency at the beginning, but be patient, be positive. That's what I would stress to everybody, and we'll get through that moment, and you'll build in some good practices. Okay. So I wanted to just start off this second session of accessibility and usability, and please let me warn you ahead of time, accessibility and usability is not always the most engaging subject, but it's important to really help all learners. So I wanted to start off with a quote, and this was from the National Standards of Quality Online Learning. Accessibility and usability can be defined as course design that reflects a commitment to accessibility so that all learners can access content and activities, and usability so that learners can easily navigate and interact with all the course elements. Online course materials, activities, and assessments are designed to ensure that all learners have access to the same information and are able to engage with the same interactions. This course, a course developed with universal design principles in mind, addresses Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1974, Title II of the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, by following web content guidelines. It does not guarantee or imply accessibility regulations are met, but there usually is an accessibility specialist that can help you with specifics in terms of your design. All right, and so I provided a couple of links. Here is the there will be a couple links that I will share to everybody, which is the accessibility of the National Quality Online Learning Standards, and then also the Google accessibility for a Google Classroom. Okay, so I'm going to move forward in terms of accessibility. What is accessibility and usability? And we're just going to look at the chat. That was a big quote with a lot of different confusing things and aspects of it. But I would ask, what does accessibility and usability mean in common terms? Can you go back to objectives? Let's go back to objectives. Yeah. Alrighty. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the objectives for this accessibility and usability session. Our objectives for this session are to create classrooms, again, that are accessible, that all students can participate in, and to employ good course navigation skills, tools, digital media, and instructional practices that are compliant with any form of assistive technology or to meet any form of differing student needs. So again, I'm going to do a quick discussion here and ask, what do we mean by an accommodation in lesson design? Very good. I'm seeing some good answers here. Ensuring that all students have access to learning and technology. That is, that's absolutely correct. Very good. Being proactive with different approaches. Making sure all of the students have different aspects or access to the different content, and they can access it in different ways, that meet their own learning style. So, very good. Absolutely, students can get around any barriers that are hidden within the classroom. Okay. And so I'm gonna shift forward to accessible technology. Okay. And so I really try to stress these top words of accessible technology, because you'll see here assistive technology also, and I don't want people to confuse the two of them. Okay. So by using the term accessible technology, we are meaning that we have included statements in the syllabus accommodating students for using different operating systems and web browsers. And we are ensuring that all of our files are open and they can be accessed through multiple tools, multiple operating systems. So we're not specific to one, to Microsoft or Google or Apple or anything like that. We're accessible to everything. We believe in open documents. Now, Google is I would share that Google is very good at open sourcing content, and so and they're probably one of the leaders in open sourcing content. And you'll see our Google Docs as we've done, and Google Classrooms and things. They're highly accessible, and so Google's a great tool to use. If we're employing digital textbooks, because I know some of the programs have digital textbooks with sign-ins and things like that for the student subscriber numbers, make sure that that information is posted in the class so that students can easily access that information if they're navigating through the class at any time, you know, outside of school hours or anything like that. So you want to make sure that all subscriber information, sign-ins, student sign-ins, all of those things are posted in your lessons prior to that, to asking them to access any technology. And we are also making sure that we've provided information that we want to make sure that videos or streams that we are using for the course are open source, so they don't need to have any specific technology to access them. And if they do, because I know that in the technology environment, it's sometimes difficult to make sure that we come up with a video that's accessible by all the different products that are available. But if we do a video, you know, or something that's media related, that we provide transcripts for them so that students who cannot access it can still get the information. And again, you'll see some things like with YouTube, we can do caption technology to make sure that all of the captions are up there and showing for the students. All right. So I'm going to switch over to our auditory and visual alternatives. So visual aids are usually very helpful for students, as well as auditory aids. But here are some guidelines for using those digital and audio media within your classroom. We encourage these tools as they do add a lot of variety, and they break up the classroom from being too text heavy. One of the things that will happen with a lot of online classes is it's real easy to just go through and put words on every single assignment and just direction. And that becomes overwhelming for many students. So it is important to add a little bit of variety. Use those videos. Okay, there's a lot of great tools. There's a lot of different things, primary sources, visuals, images, things like that. That it's important to use those in the classroom. However, we should be conscious of the way we use them and what their place is. Okay, we want to make sure that the students have the proper guidance. We want to make sure that there is something there that if they're on a screen reader or they're using one of these different aids, that they could still access the information that is either in the video or is linked within the lesson. Okay, we can provide directions as far as accessing things through Google, YouTube, and any modern media. A lot of those things also have tools built within them, and if you use many of the popular open source technology, they have tools built within them that will provide accommodations for learners, or they're embedded within the technology. And so it's important to do that. Okay. We want to make sure that we're conscious of the resources that we're using and that they are accessible by all students of different varying skills and things, because we don't want to continue frustrating them for them to have to go back and you know, we don't want to frustrate teachers, that have to go back and redesign their lessons when a student can't access something. Broken links, things like that can be a very frustrating process to continually have to repair those for each individual student that comes in with an accommodation. All right, so moving over to readability. A good rule of design is keeping readability appropriate for the students, okay? And keep in mind all of the students and all of their different needs in designing your classrooms and your lessons in the online environment, okay? So as a teacher, I was always very guilty of wanting to use the best technology that was available. Trying to do the glitzy presentations, you know, one of those things where we would have the rolling letters or the background noises going on in the videos, or in audio files that kind of presented a little bit of extra that were very crowd pleasing to the students, and so I would always do those whenever I first started this venture. And one of the things that I would note is they are really creative, and the students really love them until they have a screen reader, or they have something else that, you know, some type of accommodation that is needed. And you have to understand it can be distracting to eventually get to that point where the content becomes lost in that. So remember, the content is always the key. We want to make sure that our readability stays specific to the content. Any extra things that you're adding in, usually they should be there. Either the students can eliminate them, have an option to eliminate them so they don't become a distraction, or whatever they're doing, they're emphasizing the content, okay? The goal is to help students access content for learning. Keep it within the essentials if you can, kind of going back to our getting started in the learning cycle from the last lesson. And then we want students to have all the tools to use for self-advocacy, and to use them in a sense, and be able to use the tools in a sensible manner, not be frustrated by them, okay? So it's important to keep those things readable. All right, so I'm going to transition over to assistive technology. Assistive technology is a little bit different from accessible technology. So remember, accessible is just how students are accessing the curriculum. Assistive technology is a little bit more specific. It includes screen readers, which assist students for a variety of reasons, and it's ensuring that process is you have links that are readable for all screen readers. They can be picked up and they can be clicked on, highlighted. They're clear so that where the students click and some of those things. All right. There's also, it includes a lot of the elimination of the massive graphics or things that might distract or clog up a screen reader. And again, like I said, you know, we want to be conscious of not being too text heavy, but at the same time, we don't want to make it so creative to a point that students with assistive technology can't access the curriculum. Okay, so use them sparingly. All right, and a great example of an accessibility document, I would encourage all teachers to examine the GISD reentry plan. I was on it the other day. I saw that there's an accessibility mode that you can click. It will go through and pick up, and everything will go through. If I have assistive technology, I could still access that document and get all of the information in there. So I would encourage you to read it, analyze the great work of all of our administrative team that had worked over the summer in completing that document. So let's take a quick discussion here. What are the biggest challenges in meeting accessibility standards? Accessibility standards. It's always a difficult thing, especially as a designer myself. It's always kind of difficult to, you know, you come up with a lot of ideas and then you go through and you design your lessons in a specific way, and you want to make sure that they're engaging to the students, and then I have to worry about, oh, well, I have to go through and make it, how do I make it accessible? So what are some challenges you feel like you're facing? Internet, definitely. Very good. That's an interesting one. Coming from a New Mexico state, like out of New Mexico, and not having a state ID to get access to curriculum that way, that's definitely going to be an issue. Syncing with the tech platforms, that's a huge issue, right? And I would always encourage people to do, if you can, try to do some videos, some how-to videos to go through and help students to access that curriculum. Paul, that's a great point. Lack of training, sometimes it's difficult to really have the training that's important. We're doing this at such a quick rate that definitely we're building these classrooms and to try to get all of these different things embedded into your classroom at once without getting a 15-30 minute training. That's going to be a difficult thing, but I'm sure that with collaboration you'll be able to do a lot of those things. Yeah, Chelsea, that's a great point. Balancing methods of instruction. That's key. I think that's key in the brick and mortar classroom too. Is being able to balance the essential versus the engaged, and all of those different creative ways to do that. And this is a good point. Ronald Richmond put this out of parents. I mean, parents are an important part of this whole process. I encourage everybody, think of the parents as our partner in this venture. I mean, they absolutely have to have a role in this. We have to work with them, and because now it's a triad, really. You have the student, you have the school, and then you also have the parents. And so we have to be able to combine all aspects of that to really get an idea of how we're going to help these kids, at least while we're in the remote learning stage. So we're kind of coming up to to the ends of our morning sessions, and I just had a couple of, I'm going to sit here, we're going to monitor the chat, but I wanted to give you a few minutes to do some hands-on activities and just to try out some of these things that we've been talking about with accessibility and usability. And so within your Google Classroom, or you could do this in a Word document, design a lesson using headings that will support student navigation. Okay, so that's the first aspect of making accessible documents, is just using that heading tool, because that allows for screen readers to go through and navigate, the different headings, so that they don't have to read the entire document. They can go through and read, basically chunk pieces of their lessons. So let's take about 2 to 3 minutes, and let's try to work a little bit on either a Google document or within your Google Classroom, and just start to design an assignment. It's a good opportunity to open up your syllabus and start with the first section of that syllabus and kind of see how that's going to look out. Yeah. We'll just do like 2 minutes and then. And I'm going to keep monitoring the chat. And then our second hands-on activity is to start to look at some of the videos that you will use in class. So you could either go to YouTube, Khan Academy, any of these different places that you're going to, that you draw a lot of videos from, and just look to see if they have transcripts, okay? Or if there are closed caption tools. I know that on YouTube, we should have a closed caption tool. And so to make it, that accessibility is already embedded within the tool, okay? But it's interesting to see. Now, this is something that I would say over the last 5 years of working in a technology-based environment, this has really improved. We see a lot more media with with a lot more capability to meet accessibility standards. Okay, so I'd encourage you to look at some of those videos, look at some of the things that you do, and just make an assessment of whether they're accessible or not. All right, and then we're going to take you to the deliverable for today. which is to design one accessible lesson and post it and post it in your Google Classroom. Okay? And again, while we're doing this, I want to encourage everyone to join the Google Classroom, which is linked above, and the code is UI3WRRD. This can be joined with any GISD email. And I would wrap up by just saying, I know we're committed. I know we are all committed to student learning and student instruction. Definitely the environment with the health issues that are facing the community is not something that any of us really had hoped for or had planned for, but we're in this situation, and I think that we'll come out of this time frame with a much different learning style and a much bigger toolbox, I think. So we should see this as an opportunity to really improve our educational styles. All right. I know everyone is committed to student success. We here at Gadsden High School are committed to student success, and we just want to thank you for all of your work. Don't be afraid to take risks. Think of this as a time that you're going to be innovative. I always say, even as you learned today with this session at YouTube, nothing is ever perfect, but it's worth doing. We miss 100% of the shots we don't take. Okay, so I would say everybody, go out there, just really be creative and do your best on building these online classrooms. Okay. The next session, we're going to give everybody a 15-minute break, and then the next session, you're going to get a little bit of learning from the students, which is going to be asynchronous. If you go to the Google Classroom, the session is labeled Synchronous and Asynchronous Learning. It is facilitated by our District Technology Specialist, Leslie Johnson. She'll have you go through the content in there. There'll be objectives. There is some instruction. I would encourage you to watch the video. And then there's a scavenger hunt. Again, that scavenger hunt is going to be what we use to issue credit for the morning sessions. So I would encourage you to do that. That would be from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock to complete that session. At 11 o'clock, we are going to meet, if you look at the agenda, we are going to meet in the Google Meet codes. So core teachers will meet with all the instructional specialists. Special ed teachers will meet with the code provided by Lisa Aguiar, and then all of the other groups will meet with me in the Google Classroom. So that would be CTE, Fine Arts, and PE, and we're going to meet and just review the morning session. All right. And oh, I'm sorry, and then I forgot, modern languages will also meet with Leslie Johnson. So thank you all for your help this morning. Thank you again to the Gadsden staff. And hopefully we put on a good training for everybody, and good luck.